Hutchin, the political editor of the Daily Record. Welcome to another Daily Record politics stream. Given that Boris Johnson has only got days left in Downing Street, we've decided to dedicate the entire show to his inglorious spell in office. He was only Prime Minister for about 3 years, and yet so much happened in that time. And there's a lot to chew over and discuss. So joining me today is Torquil Crichton, the Westminster editor of the Daily Record, and also Annie Brown, our associate editor. So let's cut to the chase, Torquil. As I said, he's been Prime Minister for 3 years. An incredible amount has happened in that period. We've had a pandemic, we've had Brexit, various scandals. What do you think Boris Johnson's legacy is, and what sort of verdict do you think historians will pass on him?
Well, it's been a roller coaster, as you said, and the roller coaster of politics won't stop just because he's getting off the train temporarily, perhaps. But it's been an incredible 3 years, as you said. I think what he'll be remembered for Brexit. Let's get Brexit done. Remember that. Taking Britain finally out of the European Union after 4 decades. He'll be remembered for COVID, the biggest pandemic to hit the world in a century. Remember, he nearly died himself during the COVID pandemic, but he did get the vaccines into our arms in short order. And I think he'll be remembered, history will prove, or the Commons might prove, for lying to Parliament. He's the only Prime Minister who's been fined in office for breaking the laws that he made himself. And that happened because of the Partygate scandal, the culmination of several scandals, which finally brought the curtain down on the Johnson era. So how will he be remembered? His hero, Winston Churchill, said, "History will treat me kindly because I'll be writing it myself." And Boris Johnson, of course, is a keen journalist, writer and historian himself. So he won't be writing himself out of the picture or writing himself up badly, I don't think.
Annie, the Daily Record has produced some memorable front pages on Boris Johnson. We've been extremely critical of him in our editorials. And of course, in your columns, you have regularly denounced him. Just from your perch, how would you assess his 3 years in charge of the country?
Well, I think one of the most worrying things has been his total disregard for the political process, for the parliamentary process. He's a very arrogant character who really doesn't balk at corruption, etc. And I think when he first came to power, what really disturbed me was his views on women, that I always saw him as one of these Tories who perhaps thought feminism was political correctness gone mad when he was a Spectator. I mean, the record is there for all to see. Some of the things that he called women, he called us fillies, totty. He said that if you voted Tory, your wife's breasts would get bigger. He's one of those guys that one assumes, you know, when he's around women, his palms sweat. He doesn't have any sort of great respect for women. And we've seen that with his philandering and the fact that he had affairs while his wife had cancer. And I think all of these things point to him being a misogynist and a sexist, but they're also a reflection of deep flaws within his character. And those have permeated the way that he's also treated the parliamentary process. So I certainly shan't miss him. Not that Liz Truss, I think, will necessarily be any better with regards to women who have suffered immensely under Tory austerity and under Truss. She's like Thatcher, one of those women that have broken through the glass ceiling and then pulled the ladder up behind her. So I don't hold out much hope either for her as far as women are concerned.
Annie, just sticking with this theme, I mean, as a country, I suppose we like to tell ourselves that, you know, we've made huge strides on things like sexism and misogyny. But do you think that as a result of Boris's time as Prime Minister, those causes have been set back?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I mean, he's the leader and the pack will follow. And I think some of the really quite nasty scandals that we've had, you know, Tractorgate, etc., I think those are all a reflection of the fact that it's fine, you know, the boys' club is in power and they can do what they want. So I think that kind of attitude permeates down from the leader. And I think, yeah, I think we've definitely suffered. it shocked me that someone who had said all those things, including the racist things that he said about women, you know, Muslim women looking like letterboxes, etc., Malaysian women only going to university to find a husband, all of those things, I think, in that regard, he was a kind of Trump character, wasn't he? It didn't seem to matter what he said and how derogatory his words when it came to, you know, immigrants, to women, etc. It didn't seem to matter to his cult following, and I think so. Therefore, it's definitely, we've taken a step back as far as sexism and our tolerance of it is concerned.
Torquil, just on the Trump theme there, I mean, one of the hallmarks of the Trump presidency was that Trump did so many things that in ordinary political circumstances would just be career-ending, and yet he just continued on and on. Do you think Boris Johnson is like that in the sense that he's kind of raised the bar for what is essentially disqualifying? You know,
lowered the bar.
Lowered the bar. You know, he's kind of, you know, it takes a hell of a lot these days to do something that automatically triggers a resignation.
Yeah, but Trump and Boris Johnson are both symptoms, but exhibits of the same malaise, this cynicism about politics, this low expectation of politicians anyway, and the rise of populism, populist politicians who break the rules, draw attention to themselves. It's a kind of historically almost like a clown figure, because, you know, Boris Johnson's hair 10 seconds before he appears anywhere is perfectly combed, I can guarantee you that, and he ruffles it up to make himself look different, memorable, idiotic. Same with Trump's bouffant hair. You know, it's just a kind of almost like a clown stick to draw attention to yourself. It's a technique, and saying outrageous things is a technique as well. It's a way of pushing boundaries. So the next time you come to push a boundary, you know, the wall, the dike has already been pushed out, and it works because it cuts across. Because Boris Johnson was that politician, that Tory that reached parts of the country or parts of the north of England that other Tories couldn't reach. You know, he breached that red wall. People in the north, in Derbyshire, places like that, and I went around these places, thought he's an okay guy. He's one of us. He talks like us. So he took on political correctness, wokeness, as he would describe it, and fed this culture war. That was this divisive culture war that we're seeing now. So yeah, sure, he lowered the standards, but the standards were being lowered all round. He exploited that. He is, let's say it, same as Trump, a great communicator. He gets that message through. He voices what people are thinking inside their heads. He articulates some base thoughts for people, and it worked. I mean, he provided the Tories with one of the biggest majorities they've had in a generation.
Annie, we're talking about the lowering of standards here. I mean, is that a lowering of standards in politics more generally, or do you think it's more a reflection of the political right? By that I mean Trump and Johnson, because if people in the centre left did half the things that Boris and Donald Trump did, do you think that people would be as tolerant? Do you think the media would be as tolerant of these things?
I think that probably is something that does happen in the left as well. Certainly the sexist side of it, there's that toxic masculinity there. But yeah, I think populism just generally across Europe and obviously in America has lowered the standards to such a degree. People often voice stuff now that they wouldn't voice before, that they can get away with an awful lot more. And I suppose he's fed into really the rather toxic opinions that are out there, and perhaps people felt a wee bit more constrained. Yeah, I think people feel far more unfettered, and I think politicians feel far more unfettered. And, you know, that also stretches as far as, you know, the hostile environment for immigration, etc. There are a lot of really rather toxic views that are being voiced now that weren't previously. So yeah, I think the whole standard has dropped, definitely, and the media's tolerance of it. Yeah.
And Torquil, just on what is likely to be maybe the key part of his legacy, Brexit. Now, you know, he helped bring down Theresa May, became Prime Minister himself, and then used the general election against Corbyn as a sort of back me or sack me on Brexit, and then he delivered it. Now, of course, there are huge problems in Northern Ireland and with economic growth, but do you think that Boris will probably be seen as a bit of a hero to Brexiteers when the history books are written? Do you think that that's the one thing that element of our political discourse will maybe look kindly on him on?
To some, he'll be a hero for delivering Brexit, even though Brexit isn't quite delivered. You mentioned Northern Ireland there. And by hook or by crook, he did it. Quite a bit of it by crook. Remember, he tried to close down Parliament, to prorogue Parliament so there could be debate or vote on Brexit. He had to be taken to the Supreme Court in 2019 to open up Parliament again. That's when he was under the spell of Dominic Cumming, his Svengali advisor, who wanted to push the limits as far as he could. And Brexit isn't done. Brexit isn't done because we see, there's a disjoint between Scotland and England on the way people voted. Most people in Scotland voted Remain. The SNP used that to say that Scotland wants something else. But the real threat to the Union from Brexit is in Northern Ireland, and it's very serious. That trade barrier in the Irish Sea, which Johnson said wouldn't be there, but of course he signed up to an agreement that said it would be there, and he's now spending or having to spend a lot of his energy, his minister had to spend a lot of energy trying to negotiate that or wish that away. So, and there's the economic hit of Brexit as well, a lot of it masked, of course, by the massive economic hit that COVID gave us just about the same time. In some ways, you can say COVID saved him from that, the embarrassing legacy of the economic hit of Brexit, which we're feeling every day. Ask fish exporters, ask fishermen in the north of Scotland, the northeast of Scotland, how much it's costing now to get to market.
Annie, just sticking with Brexit, if you go back to the referendum, Northern Ireland and the implications for Northern Ireland barely featured in the UK debate on leaving the EU. We had immigration, we had relations with the European Commission, sovereignty, but Northern Ireland was very much a marginal issue, and yet here we are a few years on, it's the dominant issue. Do you think that maybe one of Boris Johnson's legacies will be as a politician who's undermined the United Kingdom? Ironically, given he's a unionist, but his sort of flagship policy, Brexit, might have undermined the union that he cherishes so much.
Yeah, I think absolutely, and certainly when it comes to Scotland, we didn't want Brexit, so he's the man that got Brexit done well. That's not a badge of honour as far as we're concerned. And I think his whole demeanour, the whole public school boy, the kind of Tonian arrogance, the Billingdon boy, I think it's made a lot of Scots feel even more detached from Westminster. We've been treated like some kind of irrelevance, this sort of annoying midgie that won't go away, that should just be flicked away and ignored. And so I think he's actually been a recruiting sergeant for the independence movement in Scotland. A lot of people, aren't necessarily naturally unionist, for independence, but I think he's pushed them towards it because we feel so utterly disenfranchised. We feel that we have no real say in Westminster, and I think he certainly made us feel even more remote and irrelevant from his kind of Tory and from Westminster, this north of Watford attitude that he's always had, as had many of his predecessors.
Annie, see if you're someone who looks at politics from the perspective of you want the SNP to do well and you want independence. Do you think that Boris's departure is actually a blow for the independence cause, given, as you say, he's been such a good recruiting sergeant for that cause? People will inevitably compare both administrations, and some Scots will compare Nicola Sturgeon's administration more favourably to Boris's. Is it actually a bad thing for the SNP that he's going?
I think it could have been, but bearing in mind that Truss is likely to get in, I think that probably won't matter. I think she's going to be even worse. We've seen that in the way that she...
Really? You think even worse?
Well, potentially, because She doesn't even have the level of discretion he has, and he has absolutely none, with regards to how she's actually going to speak about Scotland. I mean, I think what she said about Nicola Sturgeon, about her being an attention seeker, about ignoring her. I mean, how can you ignore the leader of Scotland if you have any respect for them and you want them to be part of your family, as she refers to us, which feels like it's going to be an even more dysfunctional family, if that were possible, under under Truss than it was under Boris. So no, I don't think that really matters at this late stage.
Torkel, just on independence again. Boris's position was essentially now is not the time. He didn't rule it out forever, but he sort of kicked it into touch. And if you look at the two candidates to replace him, they've gone much further. They're essentially ruling it out while they are leader. What impact do you think that Boris Johnson's had on the independence debate?
Well, Boris Johnson was, as Annie's just described, the perfect bogeyman for the SNP. They could pin all the evils of empire on him, of the United Kingdom on him. But he learned in office, not to ignore Nicola Sturgeon, not to disregard it, but to embrace Scotland, to embrace the SNP, to adopt this love bomb strategy that Michael Gove recommended, of basically cozying up to the SNP, cozying up to Scottish demands, and being seen to look reasonable and accommodating. He even went on holiday to Scotland. Remember, he got eaten by midges in Westeros and was chased back down home. But Truss, in campaign mode anyway, in trying to garner votes from mostly Southern English Tory membership, has taken his hard line, which for somebody who wants to be Prime Minister is not really advisable. You've got to kind of be more accommodating, show more give and take, show more dignity, I guess, in dealing with the question of independence and the question of unionism over the next couple of years. Now, whether there'll be a referendum or not will be sorted out, perhaps legally, in the Supreme Court over the next couple of weeks, just as Liz Truss beds in as Prime Minister. And she may well say that in the middle of what next one is an energy crisis or a war in Europe, that now is not the time. There will always be events, nearby events. There will always be something that will make independence or a second referendum inappropriate, the timing to be inappropriate. And I think the SNP, on their part, the Scottish Government will have to learn to deal with that and just define it as an event that is going to happen as part of your political calendar anyway, without circumstances ever being right. But, despite Brexit, despite COVID, despite being the boosterish buffoon of an Etonian that he was, Johnson didn't really shift the dial on independence. Independence versus staying in the Union is still 50-50 in Scotland. Johnson hasn't, really pushed independence over the tidal wall, nor allowed it to deflate. It's still a divided nation on its own terms. And I don't know if Liz Truss as Prime Minister will move that dial significantly either.
Torkel, you're the records man in the House of Commons. How do you think the SNP will handle or approach Liz Truss, presuming, of course, she wins the contest?
Presuming she does, she'll be in front of the House of Commons for Prime Minister's questions next Wednesday against Keir Starmer and against Ian Blackford. Interesting, how Annie mentioned at the beginning here, how Johnson, couldn't handle women, doesn't even handle women. Whenever he was against Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader in the Commons, he didn't know how to handle her. Right? He couldn't take it on, couldn't score the points against her. And it'll be interesting to see how Starmer, that lawyerly leader of the Labour Party, is this kind of barrister courtroom style he brings to the chamber. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts to it. Ian Blackford, I presume, will press on with pressing the case for independence. Ian Blackford, when he talks, seems to talk to the base, to the SNP supporters, rather than to those he seeks to persuade, either in the chamber or outside it. What will be really interesting to see, of course, is not how the SNP deal with Liz Truss or how Labour deal, but how the Tory benches, presumably all roaring in unity will deal with Liz Truss. What the summer election has shown is how disunited the Tory party, how divided they are, and how economic medicine of cutting tax and borrowing to cut tax doesn't go down well with a lot of senior Tories. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Tory party goes into the autumn and how they'll keep that show on the road.
Finally, let's give marks out of 10 for Boris's time in Downing Street. We can even go to minuses if you want, Annie. So let's start with you.
Yeah, no mark. He is a mark. Well, actually, he is more than I would like him to be. Yeah, just absolutely atrocious. I feel there might even be worse to come though. So let's give him a -10 and just plummet from there.
I think that you're being sort of complimentary even at that -10. Okay. Torkel, how about you?
Well, Brexit, yeah, he said, let's get Brexit done. He did what it said in the tin, ostensibly, but he's endangered the Union in Northern Ireland and our own future because of that, so points off of that. COVID, he hesitated in lockdown. We were locking ourselves down before he issued lockdown, and then he didn't want the second lockdown. That said, he nearly died himself. He faced eternity, and he brought in the fact, Britain took a bet on a vaccine cure, and it worked. We got there first in the vaccines. So 1 point for that. On standards in public life, -10, he's blustered, bullied, and, well, I can't say lied. Yes, I can say lied, even without parliamentary privilege, his way through public life from the very beginning, from his time as a journalist. That would change. That was built in. So overall, yeah, he's a big fat 0. COVID, getting the vaccines, okay. No one else could have handled that differently, and they took a bet and won in that. But as for the rest of it, it was, you gave us a roller coaster ride, Boris, but the party could be better without you.
Obviously, as the impartial chair, I'm going to dodge the questions. I'm going to defer to my co-panelists on this one. I think that pretty much wraps it up. Just some housekeeping issues. If you want to follow the Daily Record Politics on Twitter, you can do so through @Daily_Record, I think, or have I got that wrong?
That's right.
Yeah. Again, no, it's @Record_Politics, and we also have a Facebook group as well, which you're more than welcome to join us on. So we'll have another stream on Monday after the announcement of the Tory leadership results. There'll be a lot to discuss on that momentous day, and I very much hope you can join us then. Thank you.